So, normally when we get together here on the channel for a visit, we're talking about the big bots in the Transformers universe that we know and love. But today's going to be slightly different because we're actually going to focus more on these guys today. This is not a bot. This is a human. This is actually Spike in his exosuit. And he's one of several humans within the Transformers universe. For right or wrong, for good or bad. And we're going to spend a little bit of time today counting down the top 10 human characters in the Transformers universe in the latest GotBot Counts Down. Hey all, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, your most humble of hosts, Dennis Moulton, aka GotBot. Please like, comment, share, of course subscribe, and while you are at it, that's right, hit that notification bell, baby, because it lets you know when content of all sorts goes up here on the channel, and it helps me out a ton. Check out Machinery of Man, the Everything Factor, Transformers Collectors, NL, and the Autobot family, and why not check out the Patreon and the items available on Teespring, some shirts, some mugs, all of that good stuff. But the focus this time around in this countdown list is going to be on these guys, the humans in the Transformers universe. Now, I think a lot of people would automatically say, my favorite human is none of them. They shouldn't be in the Transformers universe. As a matter of fact, Starscream wife even said, you know, there's that many humans when she saw the way the voting was going. My mother even said, what are you talking about, humans? They're big bots. But nevertheless, last week when we looked at duos, a lot of people came up with duos that were either totally comprised of humans, like Sparkplug and Spike, or they came up with duos that sort of included humans, like Trax and Raoul, for example, or RC and Daniel, for example. And indeed, the more the voting started to kind of filter through, a lot of characters that I had even forgotten about, some I didn't even know existed, started to gain votes. Everyone from Silas to Raph to Miko to Jack to Sari to Professor Sundac to Sparkplug and Spike and everyone in between. That's not even to mention characters coming out of the various comic books or any of the other kind of iterations of the fandom. And there have been a lot. Everything from the proto-humans to Rad from the Unicron trilogy. Anyway, as the voting started to amass, naturally, we ended up getting a list of the top 10, and we have several honorable mentions. I'm going to do the honorable mentions first and get them out of the way before we dive into the top 10. And coming in for the honorable mentions first would be Astoria. This is the character who fell in love with Powerglide and caused a lot of problems. I think the episode was actually called The Girl Who Loved Powerglide. Also, tied with her in number of votes was Dr. Arkeville. Did not make the list, but did get an honorable mention, and I kind of thought that he might. A lot of people do like him, but he didn't garner enough votes to make the list. And then all of the ones I'm about to name, I gave kind of the same honorable mention to because they all had the same amount of votes. That being Kicker, all of those votes were counted against my better judgment. I detest that character. But he does get an honorable mention, as does Sparkplug, Raoul, Old Snake, and from the, I think, original Marvel Comics Circuit Breaker. So all of those had the same number of votes, all an honorable mention. They didn't make the top 10. So who did make the top 10? Well, we're going to start off with number 10 first. And coming in at number 10 is he who was the partner of RC during Transformers Prime, Jack Darby, who, while some people really dislike him, others that voted for him kind of touted the idea of how brave he was, how much he made. RC sort of changed her mind because she was kind of resolved that I've lost too many partners, I'm going to be a loner. But, of course, he kind of, you know, broke down her barriers and her walls and developed and forged a very strong relationship with her. And he was as loyal to her as she was to him. And for that reason, and based on the votes, he takes the number 10 spot. Number 9 Number 9 also comes from Transformers Prime, and it is Agent Fowler. And I always found Agent Fowler to be resourceful and brave indeed, but even when other people went against the Autobots, he was absolutely loyal to them. Not to mention that he was kind of a stud and won over the affections of June Darby as well. Number 8 was a little bit of a surprise to me. It takes us to the Bumblebee movie, and it is Charlie, who of course was the character who befriended Bumblebee in that film. And again, she had a sort of a great backstory with the strife with her family and missing her father, and it all built to her doing that kind of I guess epic dive. I don't know exactly what purpose it served, but that epic dive when she went down under the ocean as if she was going to lift B up and save him. I mean, that, let's be realistic, she wouldn't do that. But she did forge a bond with him that probably rivals any that Bumblebee has had with anyone, including Sam Witwicky. Nevertheless, people tend to find her more likable and more relatable, and I guess for that reason, she takes the number 8 spot. Number 7, and number 7 was a bit of a surprise to me. It is the mother of Daniel, the wife of Spike. I'm talking about Carly Witwicky, I suppose, and she actually is somebody that I had totally forgotten about. She is somebody who was very independent, who was very kind of brave, who reversed the effects of the immobilizer and was very intelligent. Apparently she was MIT trained. Who knew? Nevertheless, people tend to remember her for being somewhat brave, bold, intelligent, and yes, some even cited her being attractive. And for that reason, not to mention that she is integral to Spike and Daniel, I guess all of those combined is what allowed her to take the number 7 spot. Number 6. And number 6 is the underappreciated and probably underutilized best friend of Spike, that being Chip Chase. Somewhat of a genius. I can recall the episode where he really sort of used the internet before the internet was really a widespread thing. He memorized, I believe it was an anti-gravity formula. He suggested the body types of Snarl and Swoop. He tried ever so often to use computers and his intelligence and even Teletran 1 to help the Autobots on so many occasions. In fact, at one point, he even kind of acted as Prowl's body when Prowl was unable to do so, and they made a great team. And for his contributions to the Autobots and science in general, Chip Chase takes spot number 6. We're at the halfway mark. And number 5 is somebody that kind of comes with a lot of controversy because there's no middle ground with this character. You either love this character or you detest this character. Nevertheless, this character did get enough votes to take the halfway mark. Who am I talking about? Again, visiting Transformers Prime, I'm talking about Miko. Miko takes the halfway mark, and while I understand that a lot of people would complain about how much she complains, kind of how loudmouthed and bold she can be, and how much she breaks the rules, sort of the same complaints I have about Kicker, one could also make the argument that, you know what, she was absolutely brave. She succeeded in taking down many a Decepticon. She was super loyal to Bulkhead, perhaps even to a fault. But when she had the opportunity to kind of prove her mettle and her worth, she did so. Enough that she actually became a recognized wrecker. And for that reason, she takes the halfway mark. We're at the top 4. And taking the number 4 spot was a character I'd never even heard tell of before. That being Verity, Simone Carlo, who many fans will know from the IDW portion of the G1 continuity, if you will. That's kind of the long story explained. She's sort of a smart, tough, resourceful street kid, perhaps a little too smart sometimes, and perhaps a little too brave sometimes. My understanding is that she too became a member of the Wreckers, but we do see a character development within her, being someone who had been so hurt from such a young age that she didn't want to build any bonds with anyone, to being somebody who really valued herself as an ally of the Autobots. Maybe she just needed to have a cause to fight for. Who knows? But a lot of people do sympathize and relate to her. I see sort of, I guess, parallels of her character with both Kicker and Miko. And maybe she's a little bit of a mix of both along the way. Nevertheless, because of a lot of fans relating to her, recognizing her, and liking her characterization, she actually managed to garner enough votes to take the number 4 spot, and we're into the top 3. And number 3 came as a big surprise to me. It is Marissa Fairborn. Now, a few people specifically noted her IDW characterization, noting her relationship with Thundercracker and how she thwarted Alita One's somewhat maniacal plans. But several people just like her character overall and kind of how tough and self-assured she was, even in the G1 cartoon when she kind of stood up for what she thought was right, when she wouldn't let herself be taken advantage of, though she almost did get taken advantage of by a con man. She sort of did for a little while, but she always kind of came around to say, hey, I'm as brave, as bold, and as resourceful, and as, talented, we'll say, as any big giant robot. Nevertheless, because of her strength of character, and probably because she's also Flint's kid, she takes the number 3 spot. Number 2 is the only character that I actually have a plastic representation of on this list. It's this guy, Spike. Now, a lot of people kind of drew different areas of Spike, and I put them all together and gave him the number 2 spot. Some liked him in his yellow hard hat. Some liked his adult version when he has a family in G1. Some liked his IDW iteration. And a few people even said, hey, technically Sam from the movies is Spike, though I counted Sam as a separate character. Nevertheless, it's undeniable that perhaps the first and best known human that ever had an association with the Autobots is Spike, and his relationship with Bumblebee is the thing of folklore all these 30 plus, almost 40 years later now. And honestly, because of his prominence from day one with the franchise, that's probably something that earns him the right to be in the number 2 spot anyway. In terms of what he did a lot of things. He did a lot of things. Whether he was helping Bumblebee or Hound, whether he was being a liaison between humanity and the Transformers, or whether he was just stopping Decepticons the best way he knows how, or even if he was being a headmaster for a huge base, he kind of have his fingers dabbled in everything in the franchise. And that brings us to number 1. And as always, number 1 came as a kind of a huge shock to me, and it far and away was the character that scored the most votes. But the number 1 is really only part human at best. Who am I talking about? From Transformers Animated, Sari Sundac, the daughter of Professor Isaac Sundac, who was, as many people now know, was not exactly totally human. She was actually made from a protoform and the DNA of Dr. Sundac. So she's sort of a techno-organic human, kind of? Sort of. But for a long time, a lot of people did think that she was just a human. She's young, she's brave, she's excitable, and she's always curious, trying to figure out everything going on, which I suppose speaks to both her DNA of being the daughter of a scientist and her robotic nature. Of course, as Animated went on, we learned so much about her character, and we saw it develop. So many people have said that they would have loved to have seen how she would have developed throughout a season 4, season 5, and so on. Few people argued with me and said maybe she shouldn't be included on this particular list because she's not completely human. Let's just say for a moment that you abide by that idea. If that's the case, then for you folks, number 1 was actually Spike, and number 10 would have actually been Dr. Arkeville. He would have just made the list. But if you're like me, you think of Sari and you think of her as a human character who evolved over time. And because of not only her prominence, but perhaps having one of the greatest story arcs of any human character within the Transformers lore, she cinches the number 1 spot. And that's it. Our number 1, far and away stealing the hearts and minds of many a fan, is Sari Sundac. Of course, she has one of the greatest story arcs of perhaps any of the humans that were ever portrayed in any of the fiction. A few came pretty close, but how can you not love the kid who found out that she basically has superpowers? What a way to kind of develop a character. You know that I'd love to know what you think of this list. I'd love to know if your favorite even made it on it. As always, thanks for coming by and giving me some of your extremely valuable time. If you're in a position to help the channel to grow, don't forget there's a donate link down in the description. You can visit the Patreon, or of course check out the products on Teespring. Get yourself a mug, you know? Why not? Don't forget, somehow, some way, each and every day, you do make a difference. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, stick around, have some fun with us, and I look forward, man, to the next time that you and I get together to have another visit, either in the live streams on Thursday nights at the stop motion premieres, or the old-fashioned way, baby, right here inside the videos.